Good day to all. Thank you for being here today. We're going to discuss about technology and innovation and how to reduce OPEX, improve efficiency and security. It might sound oversaid, but the fourth industrial revolution is already a reality at the start of the 21st century, and the world of shipping cannot be immune to the sweeping technological change. The shipping industry is facing the challenge of digital transformation, driven mainly by the need to adjust its operating model in order to adapt to changes in the global economic environment and respond to intense competition and fluctuating demand. Terms such as artificial intelligence, blockchain, machine learning, that up to recent past only IT experts were familiar with, are fast becoming part of our daily life. Use of such new technologies might allow shipping companies to do things in a way that we have not even imagined 5 years ago. But how can vessels management take full advantage of such new technologies and achieve the magic goal of turning data into an asset without compromising the core operation of transferring goods? What are the possibilities that lie ahead of us? And what are the challenges and the risks that shipping companies might face while trying to take advantage of such new technologies? In order to help us understand better the aspects of new technologies, as well as to answer some or many of our questions, we have here today with us some top professionals from some sectors of shipping industry. To begin with, let's welcome Mr. Gideon Lenkey, Technical Director of EPSCO Security Systems, who is going to present us about cyber risks and cybersecurity. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning. All right. There we are. So it's 2:25 in the morning for me, a.m. So I'm glad to be speaking first. I've been told that we have 10 minutes to talk about our topic, which is how do we get a handle on lowering OPEX, right? And how do we bring that down and increase efficiency? And I have 10 minutes. So some threats are easy to spot, right? I think I actually sat next to this guy at a cafe last night in town. Others are not, right? But the effect can be equally devastating, right? So in order to get a handle on what you need to spend for cybersecurity risk, you're going to have to understand your threats, right? And then you're going to have to put them into some sort of context. Risk is the intersection of an asset, a vulnerability, and a threat. So we need to find a way to categorize this, right? We do this in cybersecurity the same way we do it in any other industry. You folks, being largely financial, are well aware of how to quantify risk. So when we look at cybersecurity risk, we look at it in terms of how likely is it going to happen and how bad is it going to be? How hard is it going to be to recover from, right? So we can look at it as a high probability, low impact. We can look at it as probably going to happen, low risk, low probability, right? We can look at it as probably not going to happen, but if it does, it's going to have a devastating impact. You know, we have plenty of examples of this that hit the news, right? Everyone's heard of the Maersk incident, right? Low probability, very, very high impact. And of course, you have the likely going to happen and it's going to be bad things that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So, if you want to spend exactly what you should on cybersecurity, you have to choose controls based on those risks. And this presupposes you know what those risks are, right? So you're going to have to analyze the risk to your organization. And this is a multi-dimensional problem because a risk for one organization is not going to be the same for another. They're not identical. The risks will change with time, the maturity of your organization, the uptake of technology, right? Technology comes with benefits and then it comes with risks. And in maritime, like other industries that have gone on before it with a technical revolution, has, these things are coming on and the risks associated with them are often not promoted along with the benefit. So as an organization, you need to take the time to get the right people in the room to understand what these risks are. And then you need to choose controls based on those risks. Too often when we work with companies in the maritime sector, we find that the controls are being put in usually by an IT department who's kind of supposing what the risks are, supposing what the outcome of a failure would be, and oftentimes either overestimating or underestimating the controls that are required to manage this risk. So it's kind of a guessing game, right? Well, we don't want to guess, we want to actually know. So companies that do quantify the risk, then you have to apply the controls to it. There are existing control catalogs that are published by standards organizations that are both pay for and free. Organizations like ISO, or in the US, the NIST publishes these control catalogs. So all the controls are there, as well as recipes how to use them. But again, if you want to get to that number, like how much should you be spending to manage a specific risk, you have to understand the controls you're putting in place and what they cost. Not just what they cost to purchase, but what they cost to operate, and all the business processes that surround them so that they can be operated effectively to offset the risk. And then you should also be looking at managing risks using a formal framework. If you're not working within a framework, again, and this is something the IMO recommended in the circular, if you're not governing, right, with a framework, you really aren't effectively or efficiently managing that process. You're kind of in a reactive mode, which is never good for efficiency or cost containment. And then if you know all these things, gaps will develop, right? You will identify these gaps, and you can then approach them methodically, right? It's more method than magic when you approach it in this way. And I like to say that what is measured is managed. That quote's frequently attributed to Peter Drucker, but I don't believe that's so. But it sounds like something he would say. So if you want to minimize OpEx, you want to maximize efficiency, use a formal process, right? The NIST cybersecurity governance framework is a great one. I like it because it's free and it's extremely mature. It's been used in the US for years. It's developed for the Department of Defense for contractors. But when it was developed, it was obvious that this is applicable to any application of cybersecurity, and it's released in the public domain. There are other frameworks that you can purchase as part of, say, an ISO 27001 effort. But again, why purchase what is freely available and just as effective? It starts with your risk assessment process, which I've described a bit. You need to have a documented control inventory. When I walk into a company and I ask to see their control inventory, and they look at me and blink, I know exactly where I am on that maturity scale of an organization, right? Because again, it's not just the controls and the risk you're trying to manage with them, it's the business process that goes around it. And if I see that's control 1002, okay, that says something very different to me than, we have this new box we bought. It's supposedly great. You also have to test these in a real-world setting, right? It's not enough to just say they're there, we think they work. You need to attack them with a testing methodology. A lot of companies are familiar with the pen test process, right? Where they have a penetration test, the guys try and break in. They may or may not achieve that, but then there's a fixed process that goes after it. As a company matures in their governance and the way they approach cybersecurity, what we find is you start testing specific controls. Well, this control we know is extremely critical because we know that it can result in, say, downtime, a vessel off hire for a period of time while it's remediated. How do those controls work? Well, let's simulate what we're trying to prevent here. So you simulate an attack. That means simulated malware. That means tabletop exercises where we come in and say, okay, well, this just happened, initiate your cleanup process, and then you throw things in there that you're not expecting. Oh, well, that guy, he's sick today. You're going to have to, how well documented is it, can someone else do it? You have to step through these processes methodically if you're going to get to a level of efficient governance on cybersecurity. And then, this has to be a cycle that's done regularly. I recommend with at least the risk assessment process that's annual. However, this industry is in rapid change, so you have new vessels coming online that have cyber-enabled systems. You have cyber-enabled systems being rolled out to existing vessels, right? But there should be a process built into your governance that tries to quantify the risk of the cyber-enabled system as it's brought on board. Okay, so, you're going to get the benefit of this thing you're bringing on, but what are the risks that are associated with it? So, as an organization, you'll want to see a annual process, but you also want to see a sub-process and people responsible for it internally to make this happen, to onboard new technologies. And when you're looking at these risks, I will say, especially if you're trying to get to a point where, say, how much should we spend, right? Every risk that you identify is not equal, and the amount of technology or process you need to put toward it is not equal, and it shouldn't be. Not every control needs to be the highest possible maturity level. You should assign the maturity level that's just right. One of the examples I use of this is years ago when we were pen testing financial institutions. I broke into a bank through an ATM. I should say a modem attached to an ATM. And I was able to take the source code to their banking system. This was 15, 20 years ago. By modifying it in place, I was able to demonstrate that just by leaving this modem open, they opened themselves up to someone siphoning money off through their own banking system, right? So we recommended you have to have some better detective controls here. You have to have some processes in place. You have to make sure that the code has integrity, that you know which versions you're pushing up. And the bank manager said, really? This is a small community bank. And he says, well, that modem sits on this guy's desk over here. Yes. He put a timer on it that shut it off at night. It cost $25 to manage that risk. And it worked, because when the guy was there during the day, if the modem came on, he would hear it, right? So sometimes if you're dealing with the people who are actually operating the systems you're trying to protect, the processes you're trying to protect, if you have the right people in the room, you can find effective solutions. That's a radical example, and of course that's a temporary solution because that technology doesn't even exist anymore. But the message is the same. If you spend time and you have the right people in the room, then you can obviously manage these risks, sometimes quite more cost effective than you could by just throwing the status quo approach to it. Okay, I see by my flashing red that I am out of time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Gideon Lenkey. And our next speaker is Mr. Navneet Rainu.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Navneet Rainu, representing Tototheo Maritime, to touch upon this subject and express our views on how to answer this question. So the subject of the panel being how to reduce OPEX, improve efficiency and security. And in our view, the solution lies in providing a system as a solution and supplementing it with a service from subject matter experts, and then simplifying the process of conducting voyages in an efficient manner. So I'll elaborate on that. I'll start with the storyline. A few years ago, we sat down and on the back of an envelope, we wrote down what are the elements or ingredients needed to address this issue. A lot of our customers were ending up with voyages in losses. So we jotted down all the points, all the elements, all the services that we need to accumulate to address this issue. So we started with a blank sheet of paper and started with the services. The first one was to map their assets to see where their ships are. So we needed a position service. We tied up with AIS position providers and supplemented it with Inmarsat-C positions. And then we started showing the assets on a map. Then we needed a weather layer. So we tied up with meteorologist services providing sea weather, and we added that as a layer. We put both of these things on a digital navigational chart so that we know where the assets are and how far are they from shallow zones or from navigational ranges. Then we intended to add a service of weather routing where ex-sailors can get the route from the master, optimize it for weather, safety, distance, taking ETA into account. And we thought that, okay, this would be a service which can help ship owners and charterers to make sure that their assets are going in the most optimum route. We also wanted to hit fuel savings on the price front. So we tied up with suppliers to make contracts with us, zero value contracts, so that our customers can get fuel at a better price, good quality, reliable supply. We use the concept of blockchain in this process where we log down the progress of the order which has been stemmed, right from inquiry to stem to supply. It's tamper-proof, so we can see the flow of the supply and also give support right until the bunker is pumped on the ships. Then comes the big element, noon reports. It's been going on since 80s, 90s, or when the vessels were able to send data from the ships manually. This was a good area to tap into because it's a reservoir of a lot of data filled by the master and the chief engineer. It gives insights into the ship's performance. So it was very important to, let's say, transfer this information in a visual format. So that was our next endeavor. Then came the sensors with the ability to transmit live data or near real-time monitoring. We have data coming at the frequency of every 5 minutes with multiple data points. So we wanted to tap into that. If you have this data, then there are many more things that you can provide. Before we show this data, it was very important. There was a hurdle, which was the ERPs used in shipping companies, the enterprise resource tools that they have in the companies and the offices are indoctrinated so deep and for so many years that it's very difficult for potential customers to deviate from that. So we had to sort out the integration first. Any solution needs to keep this as a priority. If you cannot talk with the ERPs, your subsequent solutions fail in a way. So that was our first hurdle that we crossed when we wanted to address the data issue. With the noon reports coming in, there was a feedback that the regulatory requirements of EU MRV, which is monitoring, reporting, and verification of your fuel consumption and carbon emissions, it was taking a lot of time. It was a pain point for the operators. So we decided to offload that task as part of the solution, and so that the operators can focus on their primary task, which was to operate the ships. And we also do that for IMO DCES. We do end-to-end solution certified by class. The basic idea is that we offload the mundane, repetitive tasks from the operators, and so that they can focus on their primary role. Coming back to noon reports, we can use this data to monitor engine performance, make scorecards, KPIs, so that the management and the operators can really monitor their fleet in terms of performance and carry out predictive maintenance instead of a reactive maintenance. So this enables us also to do consumption and power monitoring, give suggestions to the master to execute an efficient voyage. This is where we supplement it with subject matter experts. So we have a 24/7 service that can give advice to the operators, to the masters, to the chief engineers, based on the data that they are giving us. It's a very important element if we really want to hit fuel savings matter. It's important to address the claims side of it. It's becoming an increasing issue with charterers and owners deliberating over the claims post-voyage. There has to be a tool which helps us during the voyage, giving us indication on what's going to happen post-voyage so that they can avoid it. Charter party performance is an important element also. Commercial module with machine learning. When we have data and it comes at every 5 minutes, it becomes sort of a big data. We have used machine learning elements to somehow predict the consumption, the power, and the speed required to reach a certain destination at the required ETA. Security, SSAS. It's a shame that if you have all of these elements and you don't cover SSAS service, if not, then the customer have to sign up for another vendor who does SSAS servicing for you. That is where all the integration comes into the picture. Analytics and AI, when you have data, you need to use this today to show a visualization helping in the commercial aspects of the voyage. Finally, charts. Admiralty charts, digital publications, tide tables in digital formats with regular updates, because why not? You have a platform, you're giving a service, why not cover this aspect also? So in my opinion, if a platform gives all of these solutions end to end, it hits all the three elements of the subject. I would like to thank a few companies who have believed in this direction that we have taken. Maersk Line, MSC. I would like to thank Columbia, who have subscribed to almost the whole portfolio, and they've built upon it as their own control room, supplemented it by their own expertise as ship managers to stay ahead of the curve. Mr. Mark O'Neill will speak on that later. Just want to thank these establishments to believe in this. I'll leave you with an audiovisual to put this whole unstructured format into a structured format. So in my opinion, the solution lies in having an end-to-end platform, service, and a process to reduce your OpEx and improve safety and security on board. A platform which can be used on your phones, iPads, desktops, big screens in a control room to ensure that you're compliant, efficient, the solution is scalable, and that's where the answer lies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Navneet. I think we are now ready to open the panel to the floor for any questions. Before we will allow me to have questions to the panelists, a few questions myself, and then we can proceed. Mr. Lenkey, following your presentation about the cyber risks and the cyber security, I was wondering, where is the human factor there? How do you treat, in this holistic approach, the human element?
There we go. Human factor, yeah. You know, the human factor in cybersecurity is obviously a big one, okay? But it's at both ends of the problem, meaning the weakest chain in the link is always the person. The person can not follow procedure. The person can do something they're not supposed to do. They can be manipulated, et cetera, et cetera. The adversary is also human. You know, you're trying to put up machines and controls against a human adversary. Many of those controls to this day are still static controls. So anytime you have a static control in a human adversary, the human will find a way around it, right? It's, people are really good at this. The other side of the human element in cybersecurity is on the management side, right? Oftentimes, cybersecurity is left to IT to deal with, when what it needs is leadership engagement. So if you don't have leadership engagement at the top of your organization, taking this seriously and implementing it as a business process with the weight of that, you know, the administration behind it, it's never going to succeed on its own. So yeah, human element is a big factor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rainu, you have introduced us some exotic terms, such as blockchain, AI, IoT. How easy is it to introduce such terms to a traditional industry, such as shipping? Have you managed to translate these terms into tangible gains or aspects that might lead us there?
Yes, these terms, as exotic as they are the future. We have to embrace them and start believing that we can use them to our advantage. In terms of tangible terms, the companies which are traditionally operating will see the benefits when it results in cost savings, in my opinion. Today, the industry is running in really narrow, within narrow margins, where the difference between a voyage ending up in a profit or a loss boils down to either the efficient route or the right speed and the power, resulting in consumptions over and under what has been decided in the charter party. So every solution that has to be provided with these exotic terms need to convert to a dollar value, and every solution needs to express that to show value on why the shipping companies need to embrace this technology.
Yes, thank you. I'll stay with Mr. Rainu because I have a further question which is similar to the first one, but I think most shipping companies understand that digital transformation, data collaboration, information integration is inventable, but worry about first of all, about the potential risks that Mr. Lenkey will tell us a bit further about that, but mainly about the worry about the pain. The pain that means that the cost, the labor, the transformation period. What do you have to say to them? That Is it something easy? How can we convince even ourselves, our personnel, that there's something there, we have to do that?
The simple answer is with a proof of concept. So you trial the platform, you stream the data into a solution, see if it translates to cost savings, which the solution provider has to assist with. If you are convinced that it's going to save cost and time and labor and pain points, then the only thing left to worry about is the transition period, which is what we have to address. Keep the transition period as short as possible, minimum installations on board, because that's a huge logistical requirement, ports, agents, costs involved in that. Keep it digital, improve the communications with the communication streams with the ship, so improved sat links. That's a big assistance and a friend in this endeavor. Once you start seeing the cost savings and the reduced efforts by embracing technologies like this, transition period should be easy.
Thank you very much. And now, Mr. Lenkey, we have seen a complete solution from Mr. Rainu. There was no mention about cyber risk and cyber security there. I think that's why you're in the panel. Can you tell us how safe it is for a shipping company to go there?
Well, I tell you what, you can contract us to test it. No, but seriously, the complexity of a system. Okay, the more complex it is, the more susceptible it is to unanticipated consequence and failure. Right. So it's Jurassic Park, right? I mean, when you make a really complicated thing, it can get away from you. What I advocate on any system like this is when you put them in place, you have to ponder what happens when now you become reliant on it and that it's taken away from you for a period of time. So what happens to you? And this is happening right now on vessels that go off hire when they get hit with a ransomware or malware that gets on board, not even aimed at shipping, right? But it takes a system down that's critical to the operation of the vessel. It goes off hire while they clean it up, right? So you have to take that into consideration when you're employing any cyber-enabled system on a vessel. And you can have protective measures to try to make sure it doesn't happen. Protection always fails, and you have to consider what happens when that failure occurs. For example, some of the shippers we're working with right now, sometimes the solution for the malware on the vessel is very simple. You keep hard drives ready to go with operating systems installed, and the crew are trained to replace them rather than wait for a technician to get to the vessel. Simple, right? But it takes a vessel going off hire for a few days and the pain of that cost before they started thinking of that, right? If you do it right, you want to think of these things ahead of deployment rather than after you have an expensive period of downtime or an expensive incident. To the best you can. You can't think of everything, but you should try.
Thank you very much. Do you have anything to add on the respect? Especially, I wasn't even implying that the solution is not cyberproof. I think you have taken care of all these aspects of security and cyberproofing, correct?
Yes, we have a service as addressing cybersecurity, which covers not just the data coming from the ships, but also the data going to the ship from the offices. It's very important, like Gideon mentioned, the ship's data, and it has happened in the recent history that ships have been susceptible to ransomware. It's a huge risk and it needs to be addressed. I did not cover it in my presentation, but yes, we address it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lenkey,
yes.
There is one approach that recently, we've been listening to a lot and from many stakeholders that since we cannot avoid the breach, we cannot avoid the impact, we should try to minimizing the consequences. Where do you stand for that?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Minimize the consequences.
The risks, the breach is there, will happen.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen no matter what.
Right.
So we just need to minimize the consequences. We just need to find a way to control how big the impact will be.
Yeah, and the way you do that is by walking through the event you're concerned about, right? There's plenty of examples out there. We know, everybody now knows what a ransomware attack feels like because they've seen it or it's happened to them, right? So let's just use that as an example. By walking through that process, right, even in terms of either a live test or a tabletop test. And a tabletop exercise is really just a way to say, okay, these systems, these critical systems over here, they've just been hit. We need to go to backup. What are we going to do? How are we going to deal with our people? How are they going to get their email, let's say? How long is it going to take to restore? You need to have those questions answered before it happens, not in the midst of it. I've seen companies that had, thought they had all this together, and they wind up, running around trying to buy Bitcoin at the last minute to pay off the ransom. I also see companies, big companies. I just heard of one last night that didn't make the news, where a major U.S. corporation had their email down for 2 weeks due to a ransomware attack. 2 weeks of no email. In this day and age, that's pretty catastrophic, right? So yeah, to manage that, to minimize it, you envision it, you engage with professionals who can simulate the attack, and then you walk through the emergency response in-house with your in-house and contracted emergency response team.
Thank you very much. And I think we're running out of time. In case there is any, I think we're out of time, so unfortunately we're gonna skip the question from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for a very interesting introductory panel. I'm sorry, one of the difficult tasks is to keep the time, so thank you for respecting that.